Hey there, welcome back to The Truth is Somewhere, a conspiracy theory podcast. So, Megan, we have a few announcements. Would you like to chime those off?
We do. Starting in January, there's a change to our Patreon structure. I've changed the tiers around a little bit. I felt like maybe we were being a bit ambitious with the tiers we set up before. So I reviewed some other podcast tiers, and I set it to where I think it's going to work better for us, but more important than that, it's going to work better for you guys. So if you were previously a Patreon on Patreon, and you were at a $10 tier before, you are now considered an executive producer. So congratulations, Aife, you're an executive producer now. Thanks for producing the show, buddy. And then, so there was just a few changes. It's a 2, 5, and 10. Those are the 3 tiers. Each tier offers something different. So log in over there and check it out. It's at TTAS Podcast. And that takes it's showing now, but it takes full effect as of January. So if you sign in, expect goodies and things associated with the tiers starting in January.
Yeah. And
I think that was all I had to talk about. That was my announcement.
Excellent.
Was that Patreon is changing.
Yeah. Well, or rather changed, right?
Rather changed, yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. So go check that out.
Yeah, we did pause for December, so if you were previously a patron, we didn't draw anything out for December because we were restructuring, so you'll see that coming back out in January.
Excellent.
Without further ado...
What are we talking about today as far as our conspiracies go?
For our conspiracy, we're jumping on a plane, and we're going to some rural villages in England.
England? Oh,
England!
There's still rural places in England, huh?
Well, this takes place in 1945.
Oh, well, it was all rural then. So
we're going to Upper and Lower Quinton in Warwickshire, England.
Okay.
74-year-old resident of the villages had worked as a farmhand for most of his life, and he kept to himself mostly, but was nice enough that he didn't have any known enemies. And there were rumors about him around town having a strange affinity for animals, and it was said that wild birds would flock to him, and he could easily tame wild horses. And it was even said that he was able to calm angry and rabid dogs.
Ooh.
Yeah.
He was a druid.
Mm-hmm.
A man of nature.
Yes, a man of nature. So his name was Charles Walton.
Okay.
On February 14th, 1945, Valentine's Day, Charles went to work on a farm of Alfred Potter, where he had been working for the past 9 months.
Okay.
He left home that morning with his own pitchfork and a gardening tool called a slash hook. I had to look that up because I didn't know what a slash hook was. So basically they have a large blade that has a very, very small hook to it at the top.
Okay.
He was planning to trim the hedges on an area of Potter's property called Meon Hill. Mm-hmm. Witnesses confirmed that Charles went out to that area around 9 a.m., However, when Charles's niece Edith returned to their shared home around 6 p.m. and Charles was not home, Edith became worried because he was always home before 4 p.m. normally. So she got home at 6 and was like, ooh, he's not back. What's going on? So she becomes worried. She contacts their neighbor, Harry Beasley. And Edith and Harry head out to Alfred Potter's farm to find Charles. So they run into Alfred, and Alfred leads Edith and Harry to Meon Hill, where they find Charles Walton's body.
Oh.
Yep. Our animal tamer is dead.
That's no good.
That's no good.
So, how'd he die?
Dun dun dun! So his...
Animal marks?
No animal marks.
Oh.
Strictly human death.
Oh.
Yeah. So Charles's pitchfork was stabbed through his neck, pinning him to the ground, and the handle had been broken off. And the slash hook had also been used to open his throat and remained embedded in his neck.
Wow. Yeah. That's a pretty brutal kill.
Yeah. Well, it gets worse. It's even more brutal than that, because it also appeared that he had been beaten quite badly about the head with his own walking stick, which is just rude. Like, take an old man's walking stick and beat him with it. That's just fucked up. If all of that wasn't gruesome enough, there was also a cross cut into his chest.
Oh.
Yep.
So it's potentially a religious killing.
Potentially.
Yeah. It
has potential. The only thing missing from him was a small silver watch that had no real value. Like, cheap silver watch.
Okay. So someone probably was just like, yeah, this is a nice enough watch.
Yeah, people, like, they didn't think it was, like, a burglary gone wrong or anything like that.
Well, I mean, with the cross across...
I mean, you wouldn't think
when the cross on
that's
someone's
not
chest,
the
I would
natural-
not think that was a burglary.
That's not the natural inclination, no.
For any reason, no.
So Edith, Harry, and Alfred immediately contacted police, as you would. The first investigator of the case was Alex Spooner, who found similar cases of strange murders in the same area. So in 1875, a woman by the name of Anne Tennant was killed with a pitchfork by a man named John Hayward. Hayward believed that Tennant was a witch and had cursed him and the area. Tennant's body was also found pinned to the ground with a pitchfork, and a cross had also been carved into her chest. Spooner discovered that this had been a traditional way to kill witches during that time period.
Oh, yeah, it makes a lot of sense. So, he was working with the devil. That's what Spooner thinks the killer was doing, right? Spooner...
No, you're on a good track, but no, that's not what Spooner thinks.
Oh.
Because it's the way to kill witches.
Yeah,
so the killer
Spooner
wouldn't be working with the devil.
No. Oh, I'm sorry. Maybe I misspoke. The Spooner thinks that it was a bad connection. Essentially, the killer thought that those two people that I've heard of so far were working with the devil.
Yes.
So he killed them.
Yes, that is the correct connection.
Yes,
that is a good connection.
Witches, or rather, they were from outer space.
No, maybe that too. Witches are they get their power from aliens.
Yeah, right.
So Spooner also found several reports of a large spectral black dog in the area, made by a boy named Charles Watson.
Wait, a spectral black dog?
Yeah, like big black ghost dog. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. The Harry Potter fans out there will totally have, like, a Trelawney's voice in their head going, "My dear, you have the Grim." Because that's what I thought the whole time I was writing this. I was like, oh, they've seen a Grim.
Oh, was a Grim a big black dog?
Yes.
Oh.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay.
And it's like a symbol of death. It's like a
was that in the movies?
Of death. Yes, it was.
Which one?
The third one.
I don't remember that.
Okay. Well, it's time for a Harry Potter rewatch. That's what you've just told me. Congratulations.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember it.
Nice try.
Yeah, it was in the third one.
Yeah, nice try.
Somewhere between, like, the first hour to 2.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So these reports by Charles Watson, a boy named Charles Watson. This was in 1875 during the Anne Tennant murder. Mm-hmm. But it's now thought that the young Charles Watson is our now deceased Charles Walton.
Oh, okay. So
who reported seeing the black dog. Okay. That's what they think.
Okay, they think there was like a transcribing error or something?
There's no proof of this, but this is what's thought. Mm-hmm. So young Charles Watson had reported seeing the dog several nights in a row, and then seeing the spectral image of a headless woman the same day his sister died. Oh. So he's, like, seeing them as, like, harbingers, basically, right? Yeah. There was some speculation that Watson may have been related to Tennant, but there's no proof of that.
Okay.
So this is what Spooner's finding as he's digging in. The more Spooner looked, the more strange things he uncovered. Meon Hill's history was rife with stories involving witchcraft. The hill had been rumored to be a place where dark magic and rituals were conducted as far back as the days of the Celts, which makes a lot of sense. Like, yeah. When we talk about, ancient civilizations, like the Celts or medieval Scandinavia, we're talking about paganism, which has been converted into this weird idea of, like, oh, evil, devil worship, witchcraft. Well, right, because in modern Christianity.
Paganism was essentially widespread throughout all of Europe. Right. Until Christianity came through and changed that.
Yeah. So it's all well and good to be like, oh, this area had witchcraft when the Celts were here. But, like, what the fuck is witchcraft versus, like, their religion of the time? Like, the well-established, centuries-old religion of paganism. Mm-hmm. Like, like, you're just taking, like, the Christian spin on what their religion was.
Right, well, most of that stuff was considered to be normal practice. A lot of it wasn't even religion, as much as it was folklore that got stepped on. Yeah. For instance, like, the Fae were just considered to be creatures or other beings that were stealthy and kind of magical that lived in the forests or in rivers or similar places. But when Christianity took over and people were still, they still believed in the Fae, the churches came around and started saying, oh, those are demons. Mm-hmm. So don't acknowledge them.
Well, and, like, even the church's view on witchcraft changed dramatically. Mm-hmm. Like, I don't want to get into it too much, but, like, alewives and being linked to witchcraft, so, like, before the 1600s, the church was like, oh, no, witches aren't a real thing, that's just made-up superstition, blah, 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 oogie boogie, don't believe in that, it's not true. And then, like, as women started to, like, come forward and try to own property and do things without husbands, the church was like, witches! They're witches! They must be witches!
Witches!
Sorry for your ears. I know that was really loud.
That was really loud.
I apologize.
Man.
I'm sorry you have to edit that later.
Yeah. Okay.
Right. Anyway, so it's just kind of like, we have this Christian lens over what witchcraft is, but the Christian lens was not even always the lens that it is now. So it's very interesting.
Things change.
When these get pulled, like, oh, it goes back this many centuries. Well, like, that wasn't even what it was called back then. And, like, how much of that is even true?
True.
Anyway.
As far as anything goes.
Yeah.
Anything and everything. Not to even be a stickler against Christianity. Everything is subject to it.
The point was that, okay, so Celts. So the sightings of the spectral black dogs went back far before Charles Watson, the boy. And Spooner speculated that Charles had been murdered because someone thought he was practicing magic. So our Charles Walton.
Yeah. Okay.
In 1945. So he gave all of this information over to two detectives from Scotland Yard, who were brought in to work the high-profile case in the small villages. Mm-hmm. Robert Fabian and Albert Webb regarded Spooner's speculation as outlandish and believed they had a psychopath on their hands. Makes sense.
Sure.
But, like, so, here's my argument against this, though. Like, maybe your psychopath thinks this guy's a witch. Right?
Well, yeah,
like,
absolutely.
Just because you don't put stock in, like, the supernatural of this, just because you're like, oh, he's not a witch, doesn't mean you shouldn't be looking at that lead, because it may be somebody in town who believes that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Fabian and Webb combed the crime scene thoroughly, ordering aerial photos and sweeping the grounds with metal detectors in hopes of finding the watch. Mm-hmm. They didn't find the watch.
Okay.
They dug deeply into Charles's background. They noticed that Charles seemed to have burned through an inordinate amount of savings since 1927, when his wife died. Mm-hmm. No one knows where the money had gone or why Charles would have spent so much in recent years. So, like, tons of money just in 20 years gone.
Yeah, I don't know. He's single. Give him a break.
Sure. Sure. The detective spent a lot of time interviewing local people who told them that Charles's affinity for animals was actually the result of witchcraft. Mm-hmm. They also told of rumors that an elderly man had been seen walking around in the middle of the night, and some assumed that it must be Charles up to no good. Mm-hmm. Nefarious no good witchcraft acts.
That 74-year-old man's up to no good.
He's up to no good. 74-year-old warlock.
Yeah, he's a warlock.
That can't spell anything but bad.
Communing with the devil and his the aliens that give him his powers.
Yeah. So there were tons of rumors that Charles had cursed the land so the crops would die and livestock would become sick. Mm-hmm. There was a large crop failure in 1944 that some people blamed on Charles. And there were 2 dead heifers that had been found just days before Charles was murdered. So people were, like, blaming this on him. Like, so crops fail, it happens. Like, maybe your soil wasn't rich that year. Like, crops just fucking fail, it happens. Like, that doesn't mean that this guy is a witch. And then, like, maybe, I don't know, coyotes or wolves or foxes or some other predator killed your fucking cows.
It's kind of interesting the way you wrote this, because it seems like in the beginning you're like, oh, innocent man. He communed with animals, and he was bloody. He was murdered and murdered. I cannot get my words right. He was murdered. He was murdered in this horrible bloody act, and his watch was stolen from him. Oh yeah, but here's all the reasons why they did that. Not just because he communed with animals, but more along the lines that they thought that crops are failing because of him. He was, conducting mischief in the forest. Yeah, I see what you're doing there.
Yeah.
Trying to get me to think one way and
pulling the rug out from underneath you.
I know, but I mean, still, they thought he was a witch.
They thought he was a witch. Some people claimed that their land had become infested with natterjack toads, which, they're a sign of a hex, apparently. And it was rumored that Charles kept them as pets. Yep.
Natterjack toads?
Natterjack toads.
Okay.
He kept them as pets. Several people also claim to have seen the spectral black dog in the days leading up to Charles's death. So, whatever it is, there are stray black dogs running around this village.
Stray black dogs and crazy toads that are probably his familiars.
Probably. February 14th in the Fabian calendar fell on the pagan festival of Imbolc, and it was considered a perfect time for performing a blood sacrifice.
Okay.
So townspeople thought that perhaps Charles was killed as a sacrifice to stop his curse on the land, and his blood was used to replenish the earth. So now I'm like, wait.
Who are the witches here?
Who are the witches here? Is it good coven against bad warlock? Is that what's happening? Or is it
I thought you said good Kevin.
Good Kevin. Good job, Kevin.
Good Kevin. He was the murder. Well, we didn't say Kevin did it. We didn't say Kevin murdered him. It was good coven. Covens. That's
good
coven. Good coven.
Good coven versus the bad warlock? Or was it he was a witch and he cursed the land, and then some God-fearing gentleman used his own tricks against him? What is this? It's so weird.
Well, I really don't think so, because how about the other lady that was killed? Was she killed on February 14th?
No, I don't think so.
Okay,
it didn't say when she was killed.
So I just feel like this... I mean, it seems odd that you would kill two people in the exact same way and not do it for the same reason.
Well, I mean, they were killed 75 years apart, though.
Oh, okay.
It wasn't
I didn't realize
it was
that
1875 and 1945.
Okay, so maybe he saw pictures of him, the guy that did it, and
maybe,
and thought that it was a fun way to kill somebody.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know.
That's what I usually do. I look at crime scene photos and I think that's a fun way to kill someone.
When you're crazy.
Yeah, true. When you're just your average psychopath.
Mm-hmm.
So, in addition to Charles's death, a large black dog was found dead, having been strung up on a tree near the location of Charles's body.
Oh.
Yeah.
Do you think he had talked about I guess if this is the Watson, that would explain why, because wasn't it Watson
Charles... and Walton, if he was the same person?
Yeah, right, maybe Watson, because Watson was the one that claimed to see the black dogs, right?
Wait, that math doesn't add up. There's no way he could be the same person. If he was 74 in 1945 when he died, and that woman was killed in 1875, he would have been 4.
A 4-year-old can see black dogs.
Oh, I guess they could tell the police that they saw a black dog.
I saw a black doggy.
I saw a black dog, and then I saw a headless woman, and then my sister died.
Please, sir, I saw a black doggy.
I don't know. Okay, anyway. The bit about the black dog being dead might not be true.
Okay.
That's the one thing that I do have to put out there. That is not a fact. It is what has been said, but it was not in the police notes, apparently.
Unacceptable.
So then, police and local newspapers received a letter from someone calling themselves, quote, Mrs. Jones, and she claimed to have been the lover of a famous occultist, Aleister Crowley, and she also claimed to be a witch. She said that her coven had sacrificed Charles as a blood ritual. This confession was never pursued by the police.
Oh.
Authorities remained skeptical of any supernatural causes of death and basically didn't take any of the supernatural hints or tips seriously and never followed up on any of those leads. So again, I go back to just because you don't believe doesn't mean Mrs. Jones doesn't believe.
Right.
You're dealing with crazy here.
And crazy is as crazy does.
Yeah.
Right?
So
those crazy people are just out there making sacrifices.
Yep.
And they're like, we're witches, and they're like, oh, you couldn't do it.
There's no way. You're too crazy.
You're too crazy.
Yep. So, on the not crazy side, Albert Potter was actually the prime suspect for Fabian and Webb.
Okay.
He had told the authorities that he had seen Charles working in a sleeved shirt, but Charles was found wearing a jacket and a sleeveless shirt.
Okay.
He also claimed that his fingerprints would be found on the tools because he had touched them upon discovering the body. So, like, the handle to the pitchfork and the hook thing. So, they didn't find any fingerprints on the murder weapons at all because they had been wiped clean.
Why?
Yeah. So...
Like, who wiped them clean?
Like, the murderer wiped them clean.
Oh, that's... Okay. Okay.
But Albert Potter was like, oh, you might find my fingerprints on those because I touched them. But there were no fingerprints on them at all.
Oh, trying to clear his name.
Yep.
Mr.
So
Potter.
there were also other issues with Potter's stated timeline and the amounts Potter said he paid Charles. They couldn't find a motive other than a rumor that Potter had borrowed money from Charles, which would explain where all the money went.
Yeah.
That rumor was unsubstantiated, and therefore Potter was never arrested, because there just wasn't enough evidence.
Mm-hmm.
Another possibility was that Charles had been murdered by a prisoner who had escaped from a nearby Italian prisoner of war camp. Those prisoners often worked the farms in the area and were relatively unsupervised on their way to and from those farms, but again, a motive could never be found for this explanation either, so...
Yeah.
They were just like, well, it's possible because we've got these prisoners of war over here.
At this point, it just sounds like all speculation.
Yeah, pretty much everything is.
Or, like... Did you think any of... 1945? Yeah. They were talking about Martians in 1945, so no one is like, oh, the Martians came back for their witch?
No one.
Warlock?
No one.
Common knowledge. Everyone knows.
Everyone knows that witches get their power from aliens. Everyone.
So, it seems like the police didn't try very hard.
I agree.
It seems like they were
I think that there were other people who thought they were witches who sacrificed him.
I feel like... being that this was a small, rural town, I really believe the police were probably like, crazy Charles Walton finally bit the dust. He died in a crazy way. I mean, he probably had it coming for him.
That's what you think. But remember, these guys came from Scotland Yard. And then Fabian became obsessed with the case later.
Okay.
So he becomes obsessed with the case, and even returned to the town on several occasions, 4 years. Mm-hmm. And the watch was discovered in 1960.
Oh, where?
It was found...
Okay.
Yeah, the watch was discovered. It was found by a worker in an outhouse that was being demolished on Charles's property. So it was on his property, not Albert Potter's property.
So maybe he just took it off.
He just took it off. That's what I thought, too.
Oh, boy. Mm-hmm. That seals the deal. They found his watch in his toilet.
So they found a watch in the outhouse. No one was sure how it had gotten there, but again, I think, he probably just took it off.
Maybe he dropped it. Was it in the outhouse?
No, it was, sitting...
What, you're telling me, when did he come back and find it?
It was in 1960.
You're telling me it took 15 years?
Yeah.
For someone to find that watch convenient.
Yeah, I know. The watch contained a tiny shard of colored glass, which locals said was a witch's ward against evil spells.
Of course the locals said. The locals would have been like...
The locals are all about
witches.
The
locals would have been like... they could have found a cat hair, and the locals would have been like, it was a cat that he communed with. That was his connection to the devil. Like, shut up, people.
Yeah. So, the 1960 discovery of the watch was the last development in the case, and the murder has never been solved.
Never will be.
After all the years and Fabian's reputation was no longer on the line, he started writing about supernatural parts of the case, and even admitted that he himself had seen a large black dog near Meon Hill. There was actually a little boy walking along the road that Fabian stopped and was like, hey, did you lose your dog? There was a black dog back there walking on the road, and the little boy was like, you saw a black dog? Got real scared and, ran away.
Oh.
So I think it's, obviously a big thing in the town.
Black
everybody
dogs,
believes that, black dogs are harbingers of bad news, bad luck.
Okay. Wonder if they're still like that, if that town still exists. I bet it does.
It still exists, I just don't know that it would still be
I'd like to bring a black dog there.
Right. So 25 years after all of this, he wrote a war...
1975?
That would be only 20 years, so in 1980.
I thought you said it was 1960 that he found the watch.
No, 25 years after the murder.
Okay. So we're still in the 60s.
1970.
Okay.
1970.
1970.
Okay. Why did you have to ask me math questions? Why did you do that to me?
Math is
hard. It was
hard.
Unnecessary. 25 years later, Fabian writes a book. It's called The Anatomy of Crime. Mm-hmm. And in his book, He writes a warning, and he told his readers to think twice about getting involved in the occult, and to remember poor Charles Walton, whose death was clearly part of a pagan ritual.
Aw, he just pegged it on a pagan.
Pegged it on a pagan.
That's...
Pegging on a pagan. Pegging on a pagan.
Oh, yeah? That just seems like... I don't know, maybe it was, like, pagan gone bad, but it just seems...
Kevin good, pagan bad.
Kevin good, pagan bad.
Yeah.
Don't be a pagan, Kevin.
That's that. That's my story.
Yeah,
I'm sticking to it.
I don't know. I think... I definitely think that, I mean, there was probably some religious killing. I feel like the cross on the chest, it makes me not want to say pagan.
I think the town was super superstitious.
Yeah.
And I think possibly super religious. And I think they thought that he was a witch because he did have an affinity for animals. Mm-hmm. So I think that he was like he was murdered because somebody thought he was a witch. Yeah,
and someone probably did a ritual killing thinking that they would cleanse his curse with it.
Yeah, which is really sad.
Yeah, and
they never found the person. Poor Charles Walton.
Poor Charles Walton.
And all he ever did was be nice to animals.
Maybe he thought he was cursed, and that's where his savings went. He paid to have himself killed in a ritualistic way.
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah, he wanted to make sure, so he found Albert, right? Albert Spooner? No, Albert Potter. He found Albert Potter and said, look, man, I think I'm the curse here. I'm an old man. My wife died ages ago. I got nothing to live for. Mm-hmm. If I'm a blight on this town, take me out.
Sure.
You gotta do it this way, though.
Sure.
Same way they
I want everybody to, like, really talk about this for centuries.
And he's like, make sure you clean the equipment and you use gloves.
And then really throw them for a loop and tell them your fingerprints are on everything.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, that's that. So you can find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at TTIS Podcast. Questions, comments, concerns, recommendations, you can email us at thetruthissomewherepodcast@gmail.com. Mm-hmm. If you like what we're doing, jump on over to iTunes and give us a review. Those positive reviews really help bring our access up in the charts, and more people can find us and more people can listen to us. Oh, the thing I forgot to announce at the beginning is there's now a closed Facebook group for everybody to talk all things The Truth Is Somewhere. It's TTIS Podcast Group on Facebook. Go ahead and search for that.
Yeah, you can talk directly with us, and we'll talk directly with you on that as well.
Yes, that is true. If you really, really like what we're doing and you want to help us out, you can jump on over to our Patreon and look at our new tiers and see what's up over there. Mm-hmm. You will be finding videos and bloopers and all sorts of good stuff over on Patreon.
Yep.
And I think that's all I have for you. The truth is somewhere, everybody. Keep looking.
Bye.